once, Winston, say I recently made this presentation to the Bellevue Bicycle Club here in Omaha, Nebraska, and it's about my upcoming ride with Warriors Expeditions. Now, after the presentation, several people asked if they could see this information again, so that's why I'm recording it. Now, when I think about bicycling, I think about going on adventures. And I think anybody who goes on an adventure is having an experience that stretches them. Or in other words, it is a challenge, and they learn from that challenge. Along with that, I really like adventurers. Now, what's an adventurer? Well, that's anybody who treats life like something to be explored, not something to be put up with or endured. So I think adventurers are kind of a rare breed. And they're out there challenging themselves to take on these adventures all the time. Now, one of the adventurers that I really admire is this person here. His name is Tony Pizzo. And Tony Pizzo, in 1919, took a bet that was made between Fatty Arbuckle, the Hollywood actor, and the governor of California at the time. And the bet was no one could ride a bicycle across the United States from Los Angeles to New York City and make it there by November 1st. Now, Tony took on this bet with his friend C.J. Devine, and they decided that they would go to the Navy, see if they could get the time off, and then get on their bikes and ride across the United States. Now, when they went to the Navy told them that, first of all, they could go as long as they acted as a recruiter along the way, which meant they had to wear their uniforms, they had to keep the uniform clean and in good shape. So, I don't know, Navy uniforms at that time had to be made completely out of wool, and you were wearing that same uniform every single day as you're riding across the United States. Wouldn't have been very comfortable, in my opinion. Now the bet, $3,500 if they make it to New York City by November 1st. If they don't make it by November 1st, they win nothing in doing that. And they had to be in their Navy uniforms, and they had to represent the Navy and act as a recruiter en route. So they each had a 40-pound bicycle, which is unbelievably heavy to think about riding every day. A single speed bicycle, which also I think is incredible. And to make it even more difficult for them, if you look at on Tony's forearms, he has handcuffs on his forearms that are attached to a 3.5-foot section of chain. And that chain is passed through the frame of the bicycle. So for the whole time that they're riding from Los Angeles to New York City, he is attached to the bike. So he's riding on the bike, he eats with the bike, he sleeps with the bike, and he cannot take that chain off. That was part of the agreement, just to make it a little bit more difficult as they're crossing the United States. Now this is Tony once he made it to New York City, and he averaged about 18 miles a day going across the United States. Pretty incredible considering the conditions that he was in. He got arrested one time as he was touring, actually got shot at, and they actually made it to New York City with 2 days to spare. They made it there by October 30th of that year, collected the bet. He was interviewed by a local newscaster who wanted to know, would he make that trip again? And Tony said he wouldn't do it again for $1 million. Well, shortly after that, a local bicycle club in New York City offered $5,000 if he'd get back on the bike, handcuffed to the bike, and ride it back across the United States. He took the bet, took off, and did. So a pretty incredible adventurer, willing to really stretch himself and take on this big challenge. Now, I'm really inspired by Tony, and I think what he did was incredible. And being inspired by him, I made it my goal for 2026 to bicycle across the United States. Now, I want to do this as a self-supported ride, and I started researching routes, thinking about timing, looking into when I would be making this trip, and all of that would be required to do that. As I was doing that and researching it, until I ran into this website called Warriors Expeditions. Now, the title really caught my attention because I'm a veteran, And I saw this website and I thought, wow, I need to know more about this. So I looked into it and I found out that they actually have an expedition that goes across the United States. So I was so inspired by Warriors Expeditions, I applied that day, filled out my application, got all the information in, and at that point I now had a new adventure to go on. And this was my big idea, big adventure for 2026, right across the United States with Warriors Expeditions. Now, what's Warriors Expeditions? Well, first of all, it is a nonprofit organization that offers outdoor therapy for veterans that help them transition from their military experience over into civilian life. And it's founded by a Marine. His name is Seth Gobin. And Seth, when he got out of the military after multiple combat deployments, he found he needed time to transition back into civilian life, so he hiked the Appalachian Trail by himself. He found it to be very therapeutic and helpful for him, so from that experience, he founded Warriors Expeditions in 2013. And Warriors Expeditions offers 3 different expeditions during the year. First of all, they have a hike expedition. Second, a paddle expedition. And third is the bicycle expedition. Now, as I've already mentioned, the bicycle expedition is riding your bike across the United States. The paddle expedition goes down the Mississippi River from the headwaters all the way down to the Gulf. And the hike expedition is a hike on the Appalachian Trail. So they select individuals who have applied, and it's a competitive process that you go through in the application. If you're selected, then you are together with a group that then starts off on your expedition. Now, with an expedition, what does that mean? Well, it's a planned journey, first of all, that has some type of either exploration or mission behind it. There's a purpose that needs to be accomplished in doing this. Or in other words, this isn't just travel for leisure's sake. There is a real mission behind Warriors Expeditions. To be an expedition, first of all, you need to have a clear objective. So our objective on the bicycle part is to bicycle from Washington, D.C. to the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State. Second, there's a preparation time, and with preparation also comes training so that you are ready for a multiple-day bicycle ride. Third, it's self-reliant, so you are self-supported once we leave the Washington, D.C. area. And then lastly, there's always an element of uncertainty and effort that takes place. So when you get ready to go on an expedition, we're going to have an objective that we're going to accomplish. We have some preparation time and training. We are going to be self-reliant to get through this on our own. And then lastly, there's always that element of uncertainty. So whatever's going to happen en route, you deal with it as it comes up. And I think that really adds to the adventure and makes us even more challenging as we go along. Now, the requirements when you apply, if you go to the Warrior Expedition website and look, the requirement, first of all, is that you need to be a combat deployed veteran and you need proof of your deployment. If you have a VA disability, you need to provide your proof of VA disability. You need time to complete the expedition. So I'm thinking on the bicycle part, somewhere around 70 to 75 days. The hike expedition is longer. It could be upwards of 5 months to complete. Also, you need to complete the screening process, and as I had mentioned, this is a competitive screening process that they run you through. You need to commit to the challenge, and this is one thing I really enjoyed about this whole process, was up front they asked you to commit to doing this, or in other words, taking on the challenge of the expedition, and then after you were selected, you were asked to recommit again, just to let you know that it's important to them, and hopefully it's as important to you as it is to them. Lastly, you need to be financially stable, that you can support yourself as you are an active part of this expedition that you're on. Now, here's the trail that we're going to be taking, and it's called the Great American Rail Trail. The areas that are in green are completed railroad lines that have been converted to rail trails. And the areas in red are parts of trail that are currently under construction or being planned. And then the gray areas are where there are gaps in the trail. So the trail is about 55% completed now with connected trails. And then the other 45% is either on highways or secondary roads that connect you to the next trail. We're going to be starting in Washington, D.C. on May 19th, 2026. We're going to be covering 3,700 miles crossing 12 states. And we'll end up on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State before September 1st of 2026. So that's part of the challenge to get this completed in that time. And since I live in Omaha, Nebraska, we are coming right through Omaha, another trail that connects us and takes us right down in through Lincoln. So I'm looking forward to that part of the journey as I come through here. Now, the riders that are involved. There are 6 riders that have been selected through the selection process, and they represent veterans from Afghanistan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Bosnia, and Vietnam. Also, they're representing from the branches the Army, Air Force, and Navy. So those are the veterans that are selected. As I said, there's 6 altogether in our bicycle group that's going to be going. Now, just a couple things to keep in mind. This is not a bicycle adventure touring group. This is an expedition to help people with outdoor therapy, to help them transition from military experience over into civilian life. Second, they don't just wish you luck and turn you loose in Washington, D.C. Warriors Expeditions does a phenomenal job of getting you ready to go, providing you with the right gear and their expertise from having done this for a number of years. Lastly, this is for combat deployed veterans, and it has real benefits for helping them, as I mentioned before, transition from military service into civilian life. Now we're back to my friend Tony Pizzo. So Tony left the West Coast and cycled into New York City, and as I mentioned, that was in 1919. He departed on May 19th, 1919. Now, it took him 165 days to make that trip, and he arrived in New York City on October 30th of that year. With Warriors Expeditions this year, we are leaving Washington, D.C. on May 19th. So exactly 107 years later, we're making this journey back across the United States. Now, we're not going to be handcuffed to the bicycle, and we don't have to wear wool Navy uniforms, but it's still our challenge, and I think it's really interesting that it's 107 years later to that date is when we're leaving to make that trip. I think it gives it a real special purpose. So here's the question I think I need to ask myself, and anybody who's going to take on an expedition ought to ask. What happens if you're willing to go? What is the benefit of an outdoor therapy program that's going to take place over a long period of time when you are self-supported? This is a learning experience, and it's a transitional experience for veterans. And I think Warriors Expeditions just does an incredible job of setting this all up and then helping support the outdoor therapy program. Now, if you're interested, you can go to the website. This is warriorsexpeditions.org. And if you want to, you can help support Warriors Expeditions. They have a donate tab there where you can donate any amount of money you want to help support their expeditions, because this is a nonprofit organization that relies upon donations and different sponsors to help them equip these veterans to help them make their expedition across the United States. So that's what I'm doing for my trip for 2026, or in other words, that's my big adventure. And I'm not going to be the adventurer like Tony was, but I'm going to take on my own adventure. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this. Also, if you want to, when the expedition starts, you can go to the web page and get progress updates about where people are in this process. Thank you.